So we are right at the top of the hour and we'll officially begin. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Kayla June. I'm the founder of Soma Kine School. And today this offering is a practice in somatic groundwork. Somatic groundwork is such an appropriate practice for this particular time that we are collectively in terms of the uncertainty within our across the planet, within our own communities, within our homes. I know that we're all making important decisions right now. Somatic groundwork is all about recovering natural being. I often talk about this as one that's mentally calm, emotionally steady, and physically grounded. We are really kind of right in the middle, or maybe even towards the beginning of this particular environmental circumstance. And what feels really important is that we take time to manage and continue to maintain our own resiliency and capacity so that we can be in this with as much courage and grace as possible. Thank you so much for coming and being a part of this collective practice this morning. I'm in Boise, Idaho, and for me it's 10 a.m. in the morning. I know that you are all over the place, and I am holding the space for our web, our matrix across this earth. A few housekeeping things. If you haven't been in a Zoom virtual class before, welcome. That's what we're on here. You are not on camera unless you choose to be, and you have the control of that. So Zoom controls will be somewhere on your device, and that includes audio, which you are also muted right now. If you have a reflection that you'd like to share or feedback for me, then you can use the chat box. I won't be able to, I will not come to that chat box until towards the end of class, but I'd love to hear from you, questions, that space for us. And she's the host of this call, so she will be accessing those messages as we move through the practice. I guess finally, what I'd like to say is in somatic groundwork, I'm your guide, and I'm honored to be your guide. My invitation is to invite you into a personal practice. And what that means is inviting you to listen within, and what emerges from your body is ultimately the most important thing to follow. So if what I'm guiding isn't quite right, or something else is coming forward that's more appropriate for you in the moment, please follow that and know that that is what I am wanting for you as well. In terms of the arc of class, we will start standing and then we'll be moving into the floor. I'm going to adjust my camera here so I can be with you in standing space. I'm not sure where your energy is right now, and that's why I wanted to start standing, to give some opportunity to work with your kind of energetics, the dynamics that are living with you in the way that is most appropriate. The very first thing that I will ask us to bring awareness to is this sense of connection to the ground through our feet as we arrive into standing, not as a behavior that we brought in with us today as we've come into this practice, but in terms of really being present with how am I here? And whatever efforting or fixing that you might often do within your body mind, can you remove that layer and come into ground, space, eyes, and finding this very simple connection of what is present here. And a couple of open mouth exhales. So breathing in, widening the spaces inside of you, widening yourself into the space. Open mouth exhale, active, expressive. I'm going to do about 3 or 4 of these. Letting the jaw release if you're holding tension there. You might bring in vocalizations or sounds. These might come up organically for you. And allowing that exhale to drop our weight down and in, softening the ankles, softening the knees, softening the hip socket, and a small lightweight pulsing through the ground. Initiating this with your feet. And begin soft enough and easy enough that you can kind of catch that subtle vibration, this kind of subtle elastic bounce moving from the feet, following it up through the legs, up into the belly. Oh, vibrating around the heart and the lungs. You might even hear it in my vocal cords as I'm speaking. And there comes some of that stuck, right, out of my voice. And let's do these organic intervals here with this elastic bouncing. So bouncing a little bit, sensing into what it feels like inside of you to bounce, and then finding a stillness by a firm push through the ground and reach through the crown. And then you'll begin bouncing again. So organic intervals, bouncing until you're not bouncing, stillness until you're bouncing again. And I'll just kind of give some different ideas or things that you can play with in bouncing. So you can stay very kind of stable on the feet, and maybe that lightweight piece becomes a little more powerful, can become a little bigger. And you might start to play with how it initiates through the body and allowing it to be a little sloppy, bringing that bounce up into the hands, into the head. Maybe your bouncing begins to take you around your space just a little bit, maybe moving from leg to leg. So moving from something that's symmetrical to something that's asymmetrical. And when you do come into the stillness, noticing the quality here and how it's changed. Identifying, is it a buzzing feeling? Is it a settling feeling? And if it's something that is not bringing you more into ease, then maybe more stillness, less bouncing. And then of course, there's this way in which you can find your breathing underneath the bounce, moving air through the nose, lengthening the inhale, lengthening the exhale, and finding those open mouth expressions as you'd like. And we're going to guide a few different kinds of swings or dynamic movements before we make our way to the floor. There are so many different options. So the first one here, one arm swinging forward, one arm swinging back. And so this brings in an easy rotation through the thoracic spine. Seeing about how your breathing is occurring under the swing. And if there's a way you can connect your breathing cycle to the motion of the arms, if you're doing something similar to what I'm doing. Now this can be a very heavy, kind of more like slower tempo, where I'm kind of indulging more in the drop and sustaining the rise. Or you can quicken this and come back into using some push through your feet to initiate that twisting through the pelvis and increasing your tempo or dynamic. So choose consciously what is best for you right now, lingering, quickening, and noticing your eyes. Are you seeing the space? And what are you seeing? using eyes as a visual anchor. And resolving that one. Inhaling, drawing the arms up overhead, firm push, long reach. Exhale, dropping the arms, dropping down and in, maybe 3 or 4 times. Filling and emptying. If you haven't had an eyes closed moment yet, perhaps closing the eyes now, checking in with how you are in this moment. And what I'd like for you to do is find a sort of a map. How might you describe your sense of being, a quality? Maybe it's color, texture, maybe it's a noticing of tension or resistance or holding. Maybe you notice more an opening or a flowing of energetics. 2 or 3 things that are clear for you right here, right now. And identify those with language. And we'll return back here at the end of our practice today and do another check-in and see what perhaps has shifted. And bringing a little bit of lower body movement in here as we make our way into the floor, a shifting of your weight side to side between 2 legs. So I'm in a wide stance and I'm continuing to use this push through the leg, moving it through the pelvis. And so I'm changing my weight from side to side and allowing this then to influence and inform movement through the rest of the body, through the spine, through the arms. Again, eyes registering the environment, feet connecting to the floor, breathing and heartbeat happening at the source. Again, choosing your dynamic, choosing your tempo, and choosing the pattern. Maybe the pattern starts in one way and then ends up morphing, shaping into something else. And resolving that when you're ready. Allowing your body to speak what it needs, what's arriving from your body. How would your body like to move? What is it asking for? And finding our way back into standing on 2 feet. And taking the crown as if you were pouring water out the crown, rolling down the spine. And as you start exploring this spinal rolling, a couple of different ideas, maybe moving part way down. So head, shoulder, finding the hang, simple push through the feet, reaching through the crown. So maybe you'll go segment by segment. A little bit lower each time. Really kind of fine-tuning your awareness in each vertebra, moving, the sense of the fascial tissue expressing, the feeling of your breathing on the inside. And eventually you might find yourself at your full range, maybe spending time here in a supported hang. Maybe continuing to be in movement and even adding extension at the top, adding arm reaching at the top. Again, how can you be here in this moment with the experience of your body moving as if you had never been here before? Because really we haven't. So all of the patterns that we might be used to and that we operate with, can we instead investigate right now and possibly emerge with new choices, new possibilities? One of those possibilities, head reaching from the bottom up, tail reaching as you go down. So flat back and then curling the spine, and then finding those spinal curves in relationship. And maybe moving to the side, right? So it could be head that leads to the side. Maybe it's the arm coming up, arcing over, flowing down the side body, rotating across the bottom, and flowing up the other side. Finding here where your support is in allowing for this mobility. Where do you generate support so that you can feel safe exploring ranges of motion and all of the spaces in between? And as you're coming into the ground, starting to walk yourself out and walk yourself back. And this leads into a whole other set of explorations. So maybe walking, maybe finding a rest. Maybe this moves into a sort of child's pose or a seed position. Maybe this takes you out into downward dog. Maybe this takes you to hands and knees, pushing between lower body and upper body. And then finding your way back into standing. So an invitation here to move from standing into the ground and making agreements with how this works for you. So what I'm doing right now might not be the best way for you. Maybe there's something else. Brings you into the ground and feeling maybe a place of rest, maybe a new place of exploration. And then finding your way back up to standing. Maybe you need to take a step out first before coming into the floor. When you come into what I call a mid-level position of any sort, finding some other kind of dynamic and rhythmic pattern of movement that you can take your body through that feels right for you. So now I'm doing a rotation through the spine. And again, coming back to connecting with the ground, noticing how you're breathing under the exploration, and sensing into the experience. Seeing what you're seeing, right? So it's like seeing without a story coming forward. So right now I just noticed like, oh, I'm seeing the carpet and the texture and the various colors and how the shadows of light are being cast. And eventually finding yourself on the floor, mid-level position. And we're coming closer to arriving to the home base of somatic groundwork. Before we get there, first like to move through this bit of dynamic shaping here. So I'm on my knees, and if you're on a wood floor, this might be a good opportunity to bring some blanket or roll a mat or something up under the knees. And then I'm bringing one leg out to the side. and I'm finding a connection with my foot into the floor. So making agreements with yourself on how this is. And essentially, you're going to get yourself into a position where you can find a way to rock between your standing knee and your standing foot. And start to notice the agreements that you're making with your joints. So the lower limb of the foot that's out, foot, ankle, knee, hip, making any adjustments that you need. Maybe the foot needs to change its position, move forward, move back. Maybe it's about the hip, right? Maybe it's slowing it down to figure out where the agreements are. And then there's this standing knee here and what's happening in the hip as you move into kind of a lunge position, really, right? Okay, so after finding kind of the mobility opportunities that are here right now, let's pause for a moment and maybe placing hands somewhere along the base of the ribs, maybe belly and chest, somewhere where you can get a sense of what's happening as you breathe in, the sense of shape shifting or expanding. So let's bring some attention to the elastic breath. And as you breathe in, are you able to sense a shaping change within your torso, within the belly? Maybe it's in the low back space, side of the ribs, around the heart. And you might feel this through your kind of inner sense of the inner landscape, or you might be able to sense that through this touch that you're bringing into your own body. And then the exhale, the natural retreat or shrinking back into the center. So as we move with this, the breathing, our breathing is the first movement, and then this kind of shaping through what I call kneeling warrior 2 is secondary. So if you notice your breath stiffening, you might find a moment to pause and check back in and see why it's stiffening and see if there's an opportunity there for going back into expanding and using basically the full inhale and exhale capacity, that elastic opening, forming and reforming. And so as we move out into this lunge and begin to sustain the tempo a little bit, we're going to get a lot more sensation, noticing where the sensation is. And as I'm moving into this, I'm feeling a lot of sensation through my inner thigh, actually both inner thighs. So I'm going to connect those. I'm going to start to find pathways of sensation. And then there's opportunity to begin bringing in arcing of the upper body. That brings in new sensation. And then maybe you back out of that. So again, this is one option here. Lunging into the leg, arcing the arm over. Maybe you begin to rotate through the torso, reaching out into space with the hand. And maybe moving around that joint rotation available in the shoulder. It's another kind of option. And then maybe there's a moving into this warrior 2, and then keeping the upper body arced over, and then pushing through the out foot, and that will set up new sensation. So we're paying attention here to the feedback, breathing with this expansion quality, moving through the available joint ranges, slowing down the tempo, changing up the limb configurations, allowing for our body to give us feedback to move into the next thing based on the sensation. And what we have here is the opportunity to start doing unwinding. So what unwinding is about is moving into sensation, finding a pause there, monitoring that with attention. So again, where are the pathways? And then intending along that sensation. So maybe I choose to enhance the feeling along the torso and I move into rotation. And I follow the sensation through its organic pathway. Again, the space is in between. And it will move into something else altogether, possibly. So following the movement arc as it's presented. And then there's also a way of going completely into the intuitive landscape, coming away from intending cognitively altogether and allowing emergent, organic movement from the body. And what you might find through this process is that you end up moving into quite a different place than where we just started, and that's okay. That's part of the practice. So if we remember the continuity really of our living architecture and how when we do one movement in any one area of our living architecture, it informs the forming and the shaping of every other area, every other part. So somatic unwinding is largely about following that and allowing for self-organization. Typically what I find happen in somatic unwinding is I begin to move into the practice and a phrase of movement or study happens, and then my body resolves it back into stillness, and then there's a moment of rest, which is very important for hydrating our fascial tissues, and then beginning again. You might see if that's present for you as well. I'm going to move into the other side. So coming into standing knees again. And now for me, that's bringing my right leg out to the side. And beginning the same way in terms of, okay, let's see what is available to my body on this side. Joint relationships, joint mobility. So again, the leg that's out, foot, ankle, knee, hip. Is there a position or a placement of this leg that allows for more agreement? Do I need to make any adjustments there as I'm moving back and forth? And then our standing knee, the relationship up into the hip, the spine. And I'm coming back into attention to my breathing body, my body breathing itself. Fortunately, our diaphragm is always working, right? So it's always doing its job of allowing us to bring oxygen into the body. However, there's opportunity here too to say, am I breathing well? Okay, so I'm finding my breath right now before I begin to move more deeply into this experience. And then here's where you might start slowing down your tempo, moving into a deeper lunge. Again, noticing if your breathing begins to stiffen or change or rise up, and maybe just kind of not, where the shape shifting decreases, and making choices about that. So there's this place of the legs, right? And then we can add in the upper body. You know, two options are elbow stays on the knee here, kind of stay in a more upright position. I'm gonna do something different on this side because my body is asking for something different. So my elbow is on my knee and I'm pushing with my standing foot. And then that's influencing the leaning or this lateral reach. Okay, so we've kind of got this process here, since we talked about somatic winding on the other side, of moving in, monitoring attention, yielding, so that's the connection with ground and connection with our breathing, and then beginning to modify with intention. So either a specific choice, like I just did, where I'm going to say, oh, I'm going to push my foot, and I'm going to allow that to influence the reach of my arm. And notice what new sensory channels open up. Connecting those sensory pathways, or what we might call these long myofascial chains through the body, right? Then we might bring the hand down towards the heel, stay in that lunge, and then as we do on the other side, I shared an idea of rotating. And now with this way, I'm really using the push through my down arm to help support this rotation, and also my eyes, seeing the space, seeing my hand. Now, somatic unwinding, we have this way also when we start to modify with intention, to allow our bodies to guide us without much thinking at all. So I'm following the constellation of sensations, the feedback, and moving through. And again, as you begin unwinding, you'll find yourself in some very interesting places, the places in between. And if you can visualize the tissue architecture, this kind of spider-like crystalline web, and you have that image in your mind as you're moving, you'll start to find these micro movements will emerge. And we can unwind in kind of more subtle ways that are very powerful for organization. So as you're resolving your experience, where we started with Warrior 2 and then moved into somatic unwinding on that side, when you're ready, moving yourself all the way into the floor. Oh, and I know those of you who practice somatic groundwork with me are like, yes, we've arrived. Home base. And you might be finding your way in a very kind of creative way as you come down to the floor. So not necessarily moving directly into constructive rest as a set position, possibly, but you might also find that there are some movements here that gently bring you in, as I'm finding right now. So a constructive rest position would be standing feet on the floor, some kind of chosen relationship of heels to sits bones, or you could have feet wider too and kick knees in, which I'm actually going to do right now. That feels like a good choice for me. And what this does is kind of brings the weight of both your legs in, and there's even less work, effort. And then arms out to the side at a comfortable distance. And then I always like to kind of notice how everything is relating to everything else. So we did feet, okay, then we go hips. And then, okay, where is my rib cage? So I'm rolling through my kind of torso a little bit right now, reaching the arms up and rolling through my back body around the shoulder blades, laying the elbows down, arms out from there. And then noticing the resting position of my skull. So a little bit of yeses, nos, finding that balancing point that feels the most comfortable on the floor. Now here I recommend that you choose whether you're an eyes open orientation or eyes closed orientation, so being clear about which is a better way for you right now. If your eyes are open, see if you can kind of soften your gaze. So there's still a tension into the environment, but there's a sensing down and in primarily. As your eyes close, notice what turns in on the inside. Like what, let's say that again. If you're going eyes closed, notice what turns on in the inner landscape. As we close our eyeballs, bring our eyelids over our eyeballs, the 3,000 eyes open to the inner landscape. And what's in view for you? Now we're going to spend a little bit of time here in this constructive rest position. So as you need to change your position, that might mean rolling to a side. Like maybe you kind of you're done with lying on your back. Maybe you roll to the side. Maybe you draw your legs long. Maybe you change the position of your arms. Maybe you need to bring in a pillow or some kind of support somewhere. All of those things, they're just fine. Any of those ideas, if they work for you, please do them. And what we'd like to do is be kind of as close and as connected with the floor, with the ground as possible in these next few minutes. And we've mentioned these, I've mentioned these earlier. I'm going to bring them back up now, the grounding resources. And so first, coming into the physical contact with the floor, you might begin with the surfaces of your body that are connected to the floor. Feet are a really good place to start. What does the contact actually feel like through the feet? And that might be the surface of the skin on the floor surface. Maybe that's the temperature. Could be sense of weight. I often have a sense of magnetism between my feet and the floor. And if you notice that you're holding yourself up away from the floor, that's a strategy. It's a strategy we have. Is there a way in which you can gently invite your own experience, your own body to drop down and in to connection with the floor? And then below the floor, if you're on a second story, it might be then, okay, there's the first story, and then below that, the subfloor, and then there's the foundation. Where do you need to go to get to soil? And here, if you're working with your feet, is a really great place to come back into this expansion breath, this quality of elasticity in your breathing, the shape shifting of your inhale, how the inner spaces expand. And perhaps you can expand those beyond the torso, beyond the pelvic floor and the diaphragm, up through the kind of the diaphragm in the throat, maybe out the crown. Perhaps your inhale can expand down the limbs, all the way down to the feet. Perhaps you can take your inhale into the cellular level, the way in which each of our cells is dependent on the oxygen coming from our breathing. Cellular respiration. How many millions, 3 trillion, 30 trillion, I don't remember, cells in the body breathing, expanding, shrinking. What are you connecting with right now? There's also the way in which our exhale might allow us to drop further into the earth through our weight as if you were imprinting your body into sand, where the edges of you disappear and you become the floor becomes you, cradled, supported. This is yielding. Yielding is one of our primary grounding resources in somatic groundwork. This way in which the experience of our breathing, living, awake body, and our connection into the environment, into the earth, gives us the permission to feel the support of this life. So there's an indulging into gravity in a way, to then allow this reciprocal force, ground reactive force, to push back up through our tissues and give us some tensegrity, if you will, in our living architecture. We began today's practice with elastic bouncing on the feet, and here we can do pelvic rocking. If you're familiar with pelvic rocking, moving into organic intervals with rocking. If you're not familiar with it, I'm going to give some guiding words here. And essentially, it's that similar thing that we did on our feet, where it's an easy little push away from the floor through the full contact points of the feet, right and left. And allowing then that force to be transmitted up through the legs, down into the pelvis rocking like a boat. So that's kind of the first connection to make with the pelvic rock, is this lightweight push through the feet and how it informs the movement of the pelvis. And allowing the hip sockets to be easy and free, and the low back to move, so it's kind of arcing and rounding in these small oscillations. So if pelvic rocking is new to you, start with that practice and then finding your breathing is inside of it. And you're rocking until you're not rocking anymore, in stillness until you're rocking again. Now, as your body becomes used to this transfer of forces through the feet and pelvic rocking, sending that up through the spine, each spinal vertebra rocking as its own little boat in this fluid-filled tensional network, all the way up to where we'll notice your head rocking in rhythm with your pelvis. You might be able to take that kind of vibratory experience into releasing the jaw, the shoulders, the skull. And from here, let's move into knee drop, easy knee drop. So feet are connected to the floor, knees drop to one side, and the surfaces of the feet change. So instead of being planted fully on the sole, you're going to have the outside edge of one and the inside edge of the other. So the feet don't slide necessarily, they roll. And then as you return back to center, can you find a rolling through the back body, across the waistline, across the sacrum, until the knees return. Knees drop to the other side. Notice the rolling change that happened along the feet. And then as if somebody were drawing your top hip bone towards the floor, rolling point of contact across the back body. If you have a kind of intimacy with your SI joints, which many of us do, this rolling point of contact, you might notice that it's moving across the SI joints. And in fact, the more ease and kind of use of yielding you're able to bring into this, you can do some self-chiropractic work both through pelvic rocking and knee drop in terms of bringing the bones into agreement. So dropping the knees, bringing the knees back, and figuring out the tempo, the dynamic you want. There's a wonderful swing tempo if you want to go a little quicker. It's also really lovely to drop the knees, allow for the experience of weight, to hang on that side for a few breaths, and then to slowly, thoughtfully draw the knees back up through that rolling point of contact. Again, finding your breathing and this place of being underneath the work of the dropping of the knees to the side. And can you be as bony as possible? Like, what if we didn't need muscles to do the movement? What if we could really move with the weight of bones or the fluid quality of water, right? That kind of thing, where there's a flow, a grace as the knees drop and then return. Now, as the knees drop to one side, we can do a few different things. What I'd like to do right now is to release the top leg into a leg swing. And essentially, it's like if your toe could draw an arc or a part of a circle on the floor. So the knee drop, instead of kind of letting that energy be absorbed into the ground, take that energy out the reach of the toe, cycle it up. You might really like that end point. That might be a good place to hang, be, and even do some somatic unwinding there. So I could reach my heel. Oh, and I can begin to find awareness, pay attention to the constellation of sensations. Find some organic unwinding through there. So if that's a place you want to go, that's a great place to start. Otherwise, you could swing and then return and have this, again, a swing tempo or kind of an acceleration, deceleration experience, more like dynamic flexibility. And what I'd encourage you to do while you're finding kind of your way with this is to stay as connected to the floor as possible. So as I drop my knees, my feet stay in connection. And so my toe is really dragging around my other knee. This is where you'll find your range. Maybe you just go partly, right? Maybe with the bending of the knee and ease in the joints, the knee draws up, the leg draws up a little further. So slowing down at first, for sure, to find your agreements, to find your pathway. And then you might find you can bring your breathing and dynamic movement together in a side-to-side swing. Now, while I'm swinging, my upper body is staying yielding into the ground. Easy through the head and easy through the arms. Pausing when you're ready. So these cycles of moving and resting, very important in somatic work, allowing integration through the brain, kind of allowing that full change of hydration through the tissues. And then when you're ready to swing again, knees drop and leg swing. Now, another thing that we can do in knee drop that I'll offer here as we're coming to the end of our practice, we have the knee drop and the swing, that's the releasing of the top leg. Well, what if the top leg instead actively pushed away from the ground? And I call this a diagonal bridge. So I'm going to drop my knees to the left. My right leg is on top. I'm going to push away the floor with the right leg, ensuring that my left side body stays connected and yielded into the floor. So this effort is all happening with the top leg. And when I push my foot into the floor, find my sole of the foot on the earth, my hip then starts to move up and away. And there's a rotation. that begins to occur through the lower body. Try that much a few times on each side. So a knee drop and then a push through the top leg, and following that force transmission through the knee and then through the hip, and see if you can get as much range as possible. So you're going to play with that a little bit. So then once you get that full range on the hip, you'll feel that you're fully standing on that foot. That's a very powerful place right there. So very active push through one part of the body. So for me, that's my left leg, while the rest of the body is easy and connected to the ground. Okay, so go back and forth, side to side, and do this a few times. One thing that's very interesting self-research here, I push the floor away and I come to that full standing foot, got activity in my hip muscles for sure, right? Ease everywhere else. If you're finding that you're active around the chest, the shoulders, maybe something happened within your viscera, like in your digestive system. Maybe instead of only having this push of the leg, you're feeling activity on the opposite side, knee drop, that's connected to the floor. And what we're finding here is least amount of efforts. We want just the work to be in that top leg. Okay, now from here, we can start to sequence that. So once you found standing leg and that's all that's going, if you push a little more and allow for movement, you can begin to transfer that force up through the hip, through the ribs, and start to influence the shoulder. So leg push, so force transmission, knee, hip, ribs, oh, armpit. And while you're doing this, notice if there's anywhere that is getting skipped, right? So oftentimes the torso will get skipped, for example, because there'll be stiffness, or maybe there's more tissue adhesion there if we're not getting as much mobility through our spine. So we push, we really don't get any information happening, moving through the ribs, and then we superficially move the shoulder and the arm. That's what I'd like you to watch out for here. See if you can open up the full communication pathway. And if you start to kind of lose your sense, right, we might call that sensory motor amnesia, a place where you're like, can't quite map that. That's a great time to pause. Maybe even bring your hand to that area. And then move out of it and begin doing these micro movements of moving up to that area, moving away and back, easing out, moving in, easing out. And then eventually you might be able to map it and trace that sensation a little bit further. Now, if you're getting full sequencing, then you can begin to move into the half roll. So it's going through the torso, armpit, arm, okay, I'm feeling it, spine, eyes, reaching the arm up overhead. So the push through the leg, intending reach through the finger, head stays on the floor, and half roll, rolling all the way to the forehead, arm comes to rest. Now to come out of this, arm reaches overhead, and you basically go the way you came. So fingertips reach back behind, rolling point of contact through the torso, shoulder, and you might even find eventually pelvis comes back and you're in constructive rest. Now this is one of the best practices, total body medicine right here. So I'm going to guide that one more time on the other side. And if you're in the practice, finding your own kind of pieces of self-research and exploring, please stay there. Just want to make sure that I'm attending to kind of where everybody's at in this. So knee drop. Really what happens is we knee drop and then we slide one arm up. Come to a high Y position, pushing through the foot, moves through the hip, moves through the torso, armpit, spine, eyes, all the way out the arm, and rolling to the forehead. And then to come out of it, fingertips take you all the way back, rolling point of contact across the back body. Now we're going to start to bring ourselves up to standing here. And this is really a unique pathway for each and every one of us. So I'll talk through kind of the process and then ask that you find your own way over the next couple of minutes. So coming into the sense of connection with the ground and our breathing, these grounding resources, you'll eventually roll yourself to a new surface area, coming to some kind of mid-level position. Could be on your side. Maybe it's a sort of, again, child's pose. Maybe you're propped up on your hands some way. Maybe it's an asymmetrical seated position. You'll find kind of the next place where you can settle, pause, and reorient in this new kind of position. So as we move from the floor up to standing, got some opportunities to do some brain integration as well. We want to take care of any organization that's occurred within our own architecture. And then once you feel grounded there, moving into the next thing, you might find some kind of an active, kind of more long stretching motion might be appropriate. Seeing if you can maintain your open awareness as you start moving up towards standing. At some point, kind of getting your feet onto the ground. If it's available to you, that might be some kind of a low squat. That might be kind of more of a kneeling position. Maybe it's some kind of a low lunge. Eventually, you'll bring yourself up into feet underneath you and some kind of either full forward hang and or elbows maybe on the thighs is another nice resting place, relaxing the neck. And eventually you'll end up rolling up through the spine, head arriving last. And then as you come up to standing, checking in with yourself in this moment. Noticing how you are. Coming back to that check-in that you had with yourself at the beginning of practice, where I asked you to identify 2 or 3 kind of things that were clear for you in your experience. Noticing if there's been any shift, any change. And then registering your presence of being right now. If you feel more connected, if there's a sense of inner spaciousness, a greater sense of calm, more grounded, can you create some kind of a map for that right now so you can return to it throughout the day, throughout this week? Giving our nervous system an opportunity to recall this presence right here and right now. To return to this quality of breathing. So our transferable skill set from today's practice is to be able to return back home, to return back here as you move through your day and as you move through your week. Thank you so much for being here with me, for being here with us. We're in this together. I wish you well today. I wish us all well today. Thank you so much. Ciao for now.